Good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name is Rabbi Alvin Wainhouse. I'm the spiritual leader here at Congregation Or Shalom. This is our lovely sanctuary here in Orange, Connecticut, where I've served for the past, believe it or not, 41 years. 41 years as the spiritual leader of Congregation Or Shalom. Welcome to Greater New Haven's 16th annual Kristallnacht commemoration. Before we begin this morning's program, a word of greeting from our synagogue's president of Congregation Or Shalom, Bob Spalding. Please say a few words.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning.
And welcome to this year's program, the 16th Kristallnacht commemoration. History is usually perceived to be set in stone, where events of the past cannot be changed, and therefore we have to accept. But like a wave, the consequences of these events ripple throughout time and have the ability to touch and affect us today. This morning, you shall hear of one such episode. You shall hear the conscience and courage of Kateryna Sikorska and her daughters in the face of Nazi repression. Thank you again for joining us, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to turn to our partners in this annual Kristallnacht community-wide commemoration. The interim CEO of Greater New Haven's Jewish Federation, Amy Holtz. Amy, I'm sure you'd like to bring a word of welcome to our attendees this morning. Amy.
Yes, thank you very much, Rabbi Wainhouse, and good morning. I'm honored to be with all of you this morning. Preserving and honoring the memory of all that was endured and lost during Shoah is an essential part of the mission of the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven. In addition to our community annual Yom HaShoah commemoration, it is a privilege to co-sponsor the annual Kristallnacht commemoration. Each year, I am astounded by Rabbi Wainhouse's inspired commitment to finding and telling stories that celebrate the unsung heroes during an awful time in our history. His efforts begin almost as soon as the program ends, as he works throughout the year to bring us important and inspiring figures to inspire us. I want to thank Rabbi Wainhouse, President Bob Spalding, and the Congregation Or Shalom membership for their commitment to this program and for sharing it with our Greater New Haven community and the Jewish Federation communities across Connecticut and beyond. Thank you also to Mitch Goldblatt and the Men's Club of Congregation Or Shalom for their continued support of the Yellow Candle program. Thank you for having me, and I'd like to turn this back now to Rabbi Wainhouse.
Thank you so much, Amy. How about now? Friends, our November gatherings these past 16 years have had two purposes, two distinct aims. Firstly, we've gathered to recall a calamity that occurred 84 years ago at this time of the year, a calamity known as Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht, the very word, still fills us with dismay and anguish. Kristallnacht refers to the horrific events that took place during the nights of November 9th and 10th, 1938, in those parts of Europe that were already ruled by Nazism just before the start of World War II. The event we commemorate this morning, the event of Kristallnacht, was tragically only the prelude, just the opening scene of a catastrophe that would soon engulf all of Europe. The nightmare of Kristallnacht began in the early hours of November 9th, 1938. It continued for about 2 days. During the following 48 hours, especially during the next 2 nights, mobs rampaged through Germany, Austria, and Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia, attacking the Jewish communities there in an organized, highly organized campaign of terror coordinated by the Nazi government. During those 2 days, many people of the Jewish faith were murdered and maimed. Tens of thousands were dragged off to concentration camps. Jewish-owned stores and businesses were vandalized and looted. And infamously, during those nights, approximately 1,400 synagogues, most of the Jewish houses of worship within the Nazi sphere, were dynamited and torched and burned to the ground in full view of the police, who simply stood and watched and smiled. The Nazi authorities would later call those nights, sarcastically, the nights of broken glass, Kristallnacht, referring to the shattered window panes and the shards of stained glass that littered the streets in the aftermath of the nightmare. But ultimately, Kristallnacht would end up shattering more than windows, much more. The events of Kristallnacht turned out to be only the beginning of a catastrophe that would soon shatter Europe, a catastrophe that has come to be known as Shoah, the Holocaust. At this time of the Kristallnacht commemoration, therefore, we cannot help but remember that in the course of the following 7 years, from 1938 until the end of World War II, approximately 6 million innocent Jewish men, women, and children, about 40% of the world's Jewish population, including, incidentally, my own aunts and uncles, all my aunts, all my uncles and cousins on my father's side, would be systematically murdered, slaughtered. And thus, by 1945, the heartland of Jewish civilization, European Jewry, Yiddishkeit, lay in ruins, was no more. Friends, at this time of Kristallnacht commemoration, we remember as well approximately 5 million innocent souls, in addition to the 6 million Jews. Gypsies, mentally disabled people, Jehovah's Witnesses, gay people, innocent men, women, and children who were branded by Nazi Germany as unerwünscht, unwanted, undesirable, and marked for death, making a total of approximately 11 million who were murdered in cold blood for no reason. Why observe Kristallnacht? Why mark the beginning of this horrific period in world history? We do it because in the aftermath of Kristallnacht, in the aftermath of the horror of those 2 days, the world was largely silent. The overwhelming majority of peace-loving people around the world simply assumed that the evil would surely pass. It's a temporary situation, a momentary bout of lunacy, people would whisper. You'll see, the German people will surely come to their senses. But in hindsight, however, we know the truth. The truth is, it was that very silence, that very denial of reality that gave Nazism permission, gave Nazi Germany a green light to proceed with its obscene plans. We gather at this time of the year, therefore, to remember, in the words of Edmund Burke, a great philosopher, that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. Friends, this year, our Kristallnacht commemoration takes on even greater significance. For as you know, we unfortunately are now living through a time of heightened anti-Semitism and heightened bigotry here in our own beloved United States. Sadly, the world's oldest hatred has infected the world's oldest democracy. It's now out in the open here in this country. Where? In extremist media outlets and extremist social media platforms, and then projected from there to the wider community. This has been reflected in record numbers of anti-Jewish incidents that are taking place these days, right here in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Over the past year, we've witnessed a sharp rise in the number of physical attacks on innocent Jewish people. And the inflammatory language has debased not only Jews. It's become commonplace these days to hear barely coded derogatory rhetoric aimed at Blacks, Latinos, Asians, immigrants. Friends, as we gather here and around the world at this time, we cannot help but remember that the Holocaust began with words, dehumanizing words, demonizing words, which is why we've come together here every year in November to proclaim that evil must not have the final word. Hate must not have the final say. We gather not only to remember bigotry, but to speak out against it, not only to denounce the hate that gave rise to Kristallnacht 84 years ago, but to condemn the hate that still exists today. And thus, we open our commemoration with the lighting of a flame and a word of prayer. At this time, I'll call upon Mr. Mitch Goldblatt, a prominent member of our men's club, to come forward and kindly light the Holocaust Memorial Candle. It was Mitch's dad, Mr. Barry Goldblatt. May he rest in peace, all of us Shalom, who originally designed this candle, produced by the Federation of Men's Clubs of Conservative Judaism. The candle's color recalls the yellow star the Nazi government forced us to wear during the years of the Holocaust. I'll ask you all to kindly rise at this time for a moment of prayer. Baruch Noteach Chaye Olamim B'tochenu. Beloved art thou, who instills within us the faith that our blessed deeds, our acts of justice, our acts of loving kindness, our acts of peace enable life to triumph over death. We'll pause now for a moment of personal prayer and silent, sacred reflection. Please join me now in an age-old prayer, a prayer for peace. Shalom. Ose shalom bimromav, uya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleichem, v'al kol Yisrael. Let there be shalom, let there be shalom, shalom aleichem, v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel. As we chant this prayer, I invite you as well to offer a personal prayer for the people of Ukraine, the heroic Ukrainian people who for the past 9 months have been subjected to a barbaric assault on her citizens, innocent men, women, and children. The heroism of the Ukrainian people has inspired us all and will never be forgotten. Let us continue to pray for peace. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. When we close our eyes, we can see the way this world could be if we had shalom. Let's be seated.
Rabbi Whitehouse, thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you for that prayer. The yellow candle which you see lit here has become an international program. And I'm very proud that it has no greater impact in this area than to help sponsor this program, the 16th annual Kristallnacht program. Men's clubs throughout the world distribute yellow candles such as the one you see here in April and are lit during Holocaust Remembrance Day. Voluntary donations make it possible to support programs just like this, so that we will never forget the Holocaust. However, what Rabbi Whitehouse has done with this program is for us to not only never forget the genocide that took place during World War II before, but also never forget those countless Gentile heroes who saved Jewish lives. Thank you to those who saved lives. Thank you to those who contributed to our Yellow Candle program, so we may be able to tell their stories.
Mitch, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for you and our men's club as well for being so supportive of our annual Kristallnacht commemorations over the years. And to all who are attending this event, please consider obtaining one of these yellow candles in the spring before Pesach, before Passover, and lighting it during the week following Pesach, Passover, the week leading up to Holocaust Memorial Day, Yom HaShoah. Please call the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven or Congregation or Shalom here in Orange to obtain one of these yellow candles. Now, friends, as I mentioned, we've been gathering here every November for two reasons, two purposes, very different, indeed, even diametrically opposed. The first is, of course, to commemorate, to remember the atrocities of the past and hopefully learn from them. But our second, and perhaps even more powerful motivation for gathering has been to remember that in the moral darkness that descended upon Europe during World War II, there were ordinary individuals who simply refused to stand by and watch, people who simply could not remain silent. We gathered to remember that there were ordinary people who chose to stand up to evil at great risk, at great peril to their lives, and perform extraordinary acts of rescue. At our Kristallnacht commemorations, we've highlighted and celebrated the life-saving deeds of these heroes. We've publicly honored these unsung heroes of conscience and courage. And in doing so, we've proclaimed the self-sacrificing acts performed by these remarkable people will never be forgotten. In the midst of the darkness, they were beacons, brilliant flames in the night, reminding us that there is inconceivable goodness in the human heart. And thus, there is great hope for humanity. And why do we do this here in a sanctuary? The answer is, in a word, in celebrating the deeds of these heroes here in God's sanctuary. We remind ourselves as to what religion is truly about, what every great religion was always about, namely the quest for a higher level of humanity, and what it means to be truly human, to teach and to point to what it means to be truly human. Which brings us to this morning's program. It's true that some of the most horrific scenes of the Holocaust took place in the country of Ukraine. It's also sadly true that many of those unspeakable deeds were perpetrated by Ukrainians who collaborated with their Nazi occupiers. But what is also true is that in the midst of the darkness, the moral darkness that descended on Europe during the war, over 2,600 Ukrainian heroes, well over 2,600 Ukrainians stood up to the Nazi regime and risked their lives and the lives of their families and loved ones to rescue Jewish people from the Holocaust in Ukraine. In fact, this morning, we'll highlight the story of one of these heroes, one Ukrainian woman who not only risked her life, but gave her life in an effort to save her Jewish neighbors. Our program this morning is a celebration of the conscience and the courage, the humanity, the Menschlichkeit of Kateryna Sikorska and her three young assistants, her own daughters, Iryna, Kristina, and Maria. In fact, the title of our program this morning is Kateryna and Her Daughters. And I'll put that up, I'll put their pictures up on the screen so you can gaze on their lovely faces, the faces of heroes. This is what a hero looks like. The mother, Kateryna Sikorska, and her three daughters, I believe ages 13. That picture was taken after the war. At the time, they were 13, 10, and 6, I believe. You know, as we were searching for a hero to honor this morning, one episode seemed to jump out at me. It was this story, Kateryna's story. It simply begged to be celebrated. Who was this woman, Kateryna Sikorska? She was a young widow, just 36 years old, a widow living in a farmhouse in the town of Pidhaitsi, Ukraine. Pidhaitsi is a small town, a shtetl, in western Ukraine, approximately 75 miles from Lviv. Pidhaitsi was a Jewish town whose community dated back to the Middle Ages, the 1300s. Over half of Pidhaitsi's residents, about 2,500 people, were Jewish. Most spoke Yiddish, the Yiddish language. And in the summer of 1941, when the German army invaded Ukraine, Kateryna, with the help of her daughters, Iryna, Kristina, and Maria, at the time they were 13, 10, and 6. The baby was 6, that's Maria. She's still alive. Did whatever she could do to rescue Jews from death at the hands of the Nazi regime. Tragically, however, very tragically, a neighbor betrayed Kateryna and informed the Nazi authorities about her activities. She was arrested by the Nazi commandant. She was tried And in 1943, she was put to death, executed, for the crime of saving Jewish people. Turning her girls into orphans, total orphans, with no father and no mother. Incredibly, the three girls, Iryna, Christina, and Maria, were able to survive the war. And in 1995, Kateryna Sikorska and her oldest daughter, Iryna, were recognized and honored by Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Memorial and Museum, as righteous among the nations, Chasidei Umot Ha'olam. I'll read the certificate. This is to certify that in its session on May 28, 1995, the Commission for the Designation of the Righteous, established by Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Heroes and Martyrs Remembrance Authority, on the basis of evidence presented before it, has decided to honor Kateryna Sikorska and daughter Iryna, who during the Holocaust period in Europe risked their life to save persecuted Jews. The Commission, therefore, has accorded them the Medal of the Righteous among the Nations. Their names shall be forever engraved on the honor wall in the Garden of the Righteous at Yad Vashem, Jerusalem, August 1st, 1995. Indeed, this is a glimpse at part of the honor wall. And there's our guest speaker this morning, Iryna Korpan, who will speak to us in a few moments, visiting Jerusalem and looking for the names of her grandmother, Kateryna, and her aunt, Iryna. And there is Iryna's mother, may she rest in peace, Christina, one of the three girls. This is Lida Klar, the wife of a man, Leonid, who was saved by Kateryna. At this point, it would be most fitting, I think, to turn the program over to Yad Vashem for greater information on this subject. And so it gives me pleasure now to call upon Marlene Yahalom, Director of Education at the American Society for Yad Vashem. Marlene, good morning.
Good morning and thank you.
Can you make that louder?
Rabbi
We're going
Wayne
to raise your volume. Marlene, we're going to raise your volume a little bit.
Okay. They win.
Can you hear her now? Marlene, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Would you kindly shed some light on our subject?
Thank you. Rabbi Wainhouse, Holocaust survivors, Senator Blumenthal, honored speakers, and dear guests. Good morning again, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this very important program commemorating Kristallnacht, the Night of the Broken Glass. I am Marlene Warshawski Yahalom, and I'm honored to serve as the Director of Education for the American Society for Yad Vashem. Our mission is to build a bridge between Yad Vashem, Israel's official Holocaust Martyrs and Remembrance Authority, and the American public. We were established in 1981 primarily by a group of Holocaust survivors and its founding chairman, Eli Zborowski, Zichrono Livracha. Our current co-chairs, Adina Burian and Mark Moskowitz, our board of trustees, and our executive director continue this legacy and mission. As Director of Education, I'm part of the commitment to promote Holocaust awareness, remembrance, and commemoration through education. However, my own connection to this topic is not only professional. As a child and a grandchild of 6 Holocaust survivors, I have a personal obligation to this mission. I believe that furthering the cause of remembrance is a moral imperative and a debt that I owe to those who survive and to those who perish. Established by Israeli law in 1953, Yad Vashem commemorates the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust while honoring the heroism of both Jewish and non-Jewish people during this time. This heroism includes the Jewish resistance that existed, the Jews who tried to save other Jews, and the non-Jews known as righteous among the nations who tried and often succeeded to save Jewish lives during the Holocaust. These heroic acts were most often at significant risk to the lives of these heroes and to their families. Today's program, Kateryna and her daughters will offer insight into the topic of righteous among the nations, the many ordinary men and women who showed great courage and compassion in helping Jewish victims of Nazi terror. Our program today will shed light on the life of Kateryna Sikorska. We will learn about her heroism, integrity, and morality that are a model for all of us. But first, just a few words about the term righteous among the nations. Righteous among the nations is the official title awarded by Yad Vashem on behalf of the state of Israel and the Jewish people to non-Jews who saved Jewish lives during the Holocaust. It is an honor that exemplifies the Jewish value of hakarat hatov, acknowledging kindness, being grateful, and showing gratitude. The process of identifying and designating this honor to an individual or their family includes participation from the country of origin of the righteous person. The title is awarded by a special commission headed by the Israeli Supreme Court Justice according to criteria inaugurated by Yad Vashem. These criteria are the active involvement of the rescuer of saving one or more Jews from the threat of death or deportation to death camps. The rescue efforts were at risk to the rescuer's life, liberty, or person. The initial motivation is to help persecuted Jews and not for payment, reward, religious conversion, or adoption. The existence of testimony and documentation of the facts submitted to support this information. The story must be true, and the rescuer is not Jewish. Most importantly, we remember that in a world of total moral collapse, these heroes stand in stark contrast to the indifference, the hatred, and the hostility to Jews that prevailed during the Holocaust. Most rescuers were ordinary human beings who cared about the people around them. They were ordinary people, and it is precisely the humanity that should serve as a model to all of us. To date, Yad Vashem has awarded the honor of righteous among the nations to approximately 27,291 rescuers. These awards are based on the information that has been made available to Yad Vashem. So the actual number of heroes may even be higher, since there may be cases that to this day have not been reported to Yad Vashem. Nonetheless, these heroes did not plan to become heroes. They saved Jewish lives by providing hiding places, false papers, food, clothing, money, contact information, contact with the outside world, underground escape routes, and sometimes even weapons. Their decency exposed them to the dangers of discovery and denunciation. Their behavior was an atypical event in their own communities, where the attitude of the majority was characterized by inertia, indifference, and open complicity with the persecution and the mass murder of Europe's Jews. In the words of Hannah Senesh, these heroes are, quote, particularly bright when the night is dark. They light the way for humanity. We will hear from Iryna Sikorska, the granddaughter of Kateryna Sikorska, who was such a hero. We will also hear from Marsha Skrypuch, who will speak about her novel, Don't Tell the Nazis, a book inspired by Kateryna Sikorska's story. As you heard, Kateryna Sikorska was a 30-year-old widow with 3 young daughters, Christina, Iryna, and Maria, when the Nazis executed her for hiding 3 Jews under the floorboards of her kitchen in the Ukraine. Kateryna Sikorska's daughters helped their mother care for the Jews hidden in their home. The girls also aided other Jews by bringing food and false identification documentation. In May of 1985, Kateryna and her oldest daughter, Iryna, were recognized by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations. The date on the certificate is probably when the ceremony took place, but the recognition is confirmed to be in May of 1985. I am humbled today by the opportunity to introduce our speakers, Marsha Skrypuch and Iryna Korpan. Thank you very much. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Thank you so much, Marlene. Thank you so much, Marlene. Incidentally, Marlene will be available during the question and answer period following this presentation. And by the way, you may ask questions at any time during this presentation in the chat box below the Zoom screen, the Zoom display. Rabbi Joshua Pernick, Rabbi in Residence at Jewish Federation here in Greater New Haven, will oversee a brief question and answer period at the end of this presentation. So, and please address your questions to specific panelists. Now, we had originally scheduled Iryna to speak to us, followed by the author of youth novels, Marsha Skrypuch. But Marsha has experienced a family emergency, and she's asked to be released as soon as possible from this obligation. And so we're going to skip over Iryna, our guest speaker, so that we can allow Marsha to attend to her family situation. So Marsha, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Marsha, give us a second. We want to raise your volume.
Yes, I'm here. Is
Just
the
1 moment.
volume all right?
Okay, that's good. We're good now. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Marsha, now there's an echo, Bob. Just give us a second. Okay, this is good. Good, okay. Marsha, I'm holding your amazing book, the soft cover and the hardcover, in my hands. There they are. And I read this book in one sitting. This book was designed for young people, for teenagers. In fact, you are an acclaimed, award-winning author of youth novels based on history. You based this book, Don't Tell the Nazis, on the story of Kateryna Sikorska and her 3 daughters.
Yes.
In a word, Marsha Skrypuch. And by the way, not only is Marsha an award-winning writer, this book has received many awards. I highly recommend it. I see a number of teenagers in our audience. Please get a hold of this copy. It will leave you breathless. It will be one of the best books you've ever read. I guarantee it. Don't Tell the Nazis, the story of Kateryna and her daughters. Marsha, in a word, I'll just ask you one question. What was it about the story of Kateryna Sikorska that inspired you to write this book? Please tell us.
It was her empathy. She had unbelievable empathy. And but I wanted to write the story from the point of view of Kristya, who was the middle daughter, Iryna's mother. And I met Kristya face to face, and I was able to ask her about the choices that she made as a child. She and her younger sister were not recognized by Yad Vashem because they were too young. And I wanted to know what she felt about the whole thing and how much activity she had in terms of saving her neighbors who were Jewish. And so I had the opportunity to speak to her face to face, and she left me breathless with her bravery, with her empathy, and with her compassion. So what I wanted to do was to write this book from Kristia's point of view, because I think that it builds empathy for young people to be able to read from the point of view of a young person, day to day, the decisions that you have to make in order to do the right thing, which was to save her neighbors if she could, even if it meant she could be killed. She knew that that was what she was risking. And she came to that decision to do it herself, even though she was a child. She made an adult decision, because when you live in war, you are basically an adult, even at age 10, even at age 8. And so I wanted to honor her with that. And that's what I did in my book. It's from her point of view, from a child's point of view, who went to the ghetto and snuck in with food. And she used her own deficits as an advantage. And what I mean by that, she was a young child. And so the Nazis just assumed that she couldn't do anything. She was a girl, so they assumed she couldn't do anything. She was Ukrainian, which to the Nazis meant she was subhuman. So that meant she couldn't do anything. But she used that as her weapon to try and help save her neighbors. And that's why I wrote this book.
Marsha, thank you so much. Once again, I cannot recommend these books highly enough. Please get a hold of these. They're available on Amazon. Don't tell the Nazis.
They're available anywhere. They're available anywhere.
You will be greatly rewarded. Marsha, thank you so much. And our
Thank
thoughts
you.
and prayers are with you, Marsha, at this time.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You know, I mentioned that I found myself powerfully drawn to Kateryna's story. And as I researched it, I noticed that it's been retold in a remarkable video documentary online. You actually can access this video, anyone can. It's on YouTube. And the name of the documentary is, and I'll put it up on the screen, She Paid the Ultimate Price. Here it is. She paid the ultimate price. Just simply Google those words, and Google will lead you right to the documentary. Well, as I watched the video, learning more about this amazing human being, Kateryna Sikorska, I soon realized the filmmaker was Kateryna's own granddaughter, Canadian filmmaker Iryna Korpan. Iryna, determined to tell her grandmother's story, went to Israel, went to Ukraine in 2011 to create this film. And as I said, it's available for free on YouTube. Just Google, She Paid the Ultimate Price. I urge you to watch it. It's a 1-hour video. Well, I'm thrilled at this time to introduce Iryna Korpan, Kateryna's granddaughter, who is joining us this morning via Zoom from her home in Mississauga, Ontario, a suburb of Toronto. Iryna was born in Pidhaitsi, Ukraine, the town of her grandmother, Kateryna, whose memory we honor this morning. Iryna immigrated from the former Soviet Union, from Pidhaitsi, to Canada in 1985, when she was in her mid-20s. And in Canada, she rose to become a filmmaker, a TV personality, and a leader of the Ukrainian community of Ontario. Incidentally, Canada is home to the largest Ukrainian community in the world outside of Ukraine and Russia. Iryna also heads a wonderful project whose aim is to restore the old synagogue of Pidhaitsi, built in the 1600s. I'm going to put that up on the screen so you can actually see what the original synagogue was of Pidhaitsi. And this is it. This is what the synagogue looks like today. The synagogue of Pidhaitsi, built in the 1600s. It sits in ruins. The ruins of the old synagogue of Pidhaitsi. The focus of Iryna's synagogue restoration project. Welcome, Iryna. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Rabbi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Iryna, I have a few questions to ask you. Iryna, Hitler's army invaded Ukraine in the summer of 1941. In 1942, the Jews of Pidhaitsi, your town where you were born, were being rounded up and herded into a ghetto, which was the first step in Hitler's final solution. At that point, according to Yad Vashem's database, your grandmother, Kateryna, made the decision to shelter 3 Jewish people, 1 adult and 2 children. And she managed to hide them for 8 months, under the floorboards of her kitchen, until she was betrayed to the Nazi authorities by a neighbor. Iryna, who were these 3 individuals hidden by your grandmother? Who were they?
Those were neighbors, and one of them, the adult, Michael Klar, was a very famous and only one photographer in Pidhaitsi. He actually took the picture of my grandmother and my grandfather got married. So they have a good connection and they see each other. And before the war, my grandmother, she has a cow. She would deliver some produce to Mr. Clark. And so they were good neighbors and good acquaintances. And also the 2 boys were Dolik and Leonid Kressel. That was the sons of Dr. Zahaya Kressel, who lives across the street of my grandmother. And they were about 13 and 15 years old. So my mother and her sisters knew the boys because sometimes they go to school together or from school. They see each other on the road and play. And one day when the ghetto were established in Pidhaitsi, Dr. Kressel came to my grandmother and asked her to hide her children. And my mother, being a Christian and believing in God, in humanity, and having a good heart, so she couldn't refuse. She decided to hide them, to give them shelter. And as well, Michael Clark, photographer, would come to my grandmother before the ghetto started, but they saw already the atrocity committed by the Nazi towards the Jews in town. And Mr. Clark would bring some documents and photos to my grandmother and asking her to deliver these documents and notes to other village, to the person who was preparing and producing the false documents, Aryan IDs for Jews. So it was done by Mr. Clark, my grandmother, and even her brother Ivan helped sometimes, because sometimes my grandmother couldn't walk to another village to deliver those documents, so she would ask her brother to do that. And this way, Mr. Clark prepared the documents, false documents for his son Leonid under the name of Bogdan Topash. So that's how Mr. Clark survived, even though unfortunately he was captured and sent to Auschwitz, but miraculously he survived. And we met him in Israel and visit the family.
Yes. So Leonid actually is alive because he was able to escape the ghetto due to those false ID that was provided by Kateryna. But I want to return to your mother, Christina, and your two aunts, Iryna and Maria. Did they help their mother in any way?
Absolutely.
According to the Yad Vashem database, they assisted their mother. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. Sometimes because during the war, as you know, there's shortage of food and everything like necessary items for people to survive. So my grandmother would leave the town and bring the produce to other towns to trade. So sometimes she was missing from home for 2 days, and those girls were thought what to do. They knew they have to milk the cow, they have to chop the firewood, they have to prepare food to feed the Jewish neighbors that hiding. And my mother even was telling me that sometimes she would run to the ghetto with a little of bread or cheese and exchange with the documents that they would supply my grandmother. And those girls were amazing because they were taking care basically of the 5 people when my grandmother wasn't there. And of course, it was very hard for them, but they understand they have to do that. It's the right thing to do. And the amazing thing is they're children, but they were sworn to secrecy not to tell anyone that these Jewish people hiding in their place. And sometimes we would sit with my mother and I ask her, tell me the details. How do you connect? Whether you talk to those boys? She said, yes, they were crouching all day in that hiding place and only come out at night. We would talk to them. We would play cards with those boys. Sometimes they helping us to do our homework. So we never look at them as different, they're Jews or something. They thought they're our brothers. These girls did amazing job while taking care of their neighbors and helping in any way they could.
Iryna, the dugout underneath the kitchen floorboards. How does one woman, Kateryna, dig out a hideout for 3 people under the kitchen floor? How does she do that?
With the help of the children and her brother. They start digging out and taking the soil out, and the kids, and they have to do that at night because they don't want neighbors to get suspicious and ask what's going on. So they would do that at night and mixing with the cow's manure, to cover up. So they were just amazing what they did and how they did it. And imagine for, almost 9 months, those people, that was their house. That's where they were hiding.
And at night, when the 3 hidden Jewish people were able to emerge from the dugout, they must have been fed as well. by Kateryna and by her three daughters. And they must have just wanted to stretch out a little bit and mentally and spiritually be uplifted. Were the girls involved in that aspect as well?
Yes, as I mentioned, they knew that in the evening, every evening, they would come out. They were expecting them to play with them, to talk to them. And they were just walking in the house to stretch the legs because they were crouched all day in the small space. And they were asking what's going on in the town. Is there any news? So they will share whatever they find out from schoolmate, they will share with them. And if grandmother knew something, she would bring to them and tell them what's going on. And the food, that was the big problems, because to feed so many people, that was really hard. That's why my grandmother would travel to other towns to get the better deal. To go to Ternopil or Lviv to get the better deal and to bring more food.
It's just incredible that these girls, little Maria, 6 years old, is sworn to secrecy. She cannot tell her school friends. She cannot tell anyone what mommy is doing and what my sisters are doing. It's just an incredible situation. This goes on for months, for 8 or 9 months. It's
Correct.
incredible.
Correct, because they were so terrified and horrified what they saw happen to their neighbors, friends, and fellow citizens. They were terrified, and my grandmother decided not to be silent, but to act, to do something to help them. And she really believed that she can save their lives.
Yeah, just remarkable. Iryna, according to the Yad Vashem database, Kateryna's oldest daughter, your aunt, Iryna, was beaten by the Nazi commandant, but she never revealed the secret hideout to the commandant. Is that why she was honored by Yad Vashem? Why is her name on the wall along with her mother? What about the other two girls? Why aren't the other two girls honored? Do you have any idea?
When the Nazis and SS Gestapo actually came to the house with the search, they were looking just for Mr. Clark. They walk into the house and 3 girls were inside, and my grandmother was at the neighbor's yard fetching the water. And my mother saw them, she escaped, and she ran to the grandmother and tell her, "Mom, Gestapo is in the house." So they ran away to the priest house and hide it there. But Iryna and Maria stays in the house. And this Gestapo, William Hubert, start asking her, "Where is Mr. Clark? We know he's here hiding." And she said, "I don't know who that is, and he is not here." And he started beating her across the face, over the head. And she denied, and she doesn't know anything. She doesn't know Mr. Clark. Right. So then they start removing the floor mat and stamping on the floorboard to listen if there's an echo. So they located the spot. So Iryna understood, this is it. They're gonna kill her too. And they tell her, go to the neighbor and bring an axe. We have to open this floorboard. And she refused. And first they asked her, bring us the axe. She said, we don't have it. Then they asked her, go to the neighbor and bring it here. So she escaped and she didn't come back, but Maria stayed there. And she explained what happened. She saw how they lift the floorboard, and that Gestapo said, "Oh, dry Juda," because they expect to see just one Clark, but they didn't know about those 2 boys. And they took them away, arrested them, and they perished in the Holocaust. We never knew what
These two
happened.
boys, they were also neighbors, weren't they? These two
Correct.
boys were neighbors of Kateryna as well as the photographer Clara.
Correct, correct. Because their mother was she was a doctor, and sometimes she would come when the girls were sick. She would come to the grandmother's house and prescribe the medication, look after the children, and never take money. And instead, my grandmother would bring milk or cheese or something like that. And so they have very good relationship before the war. And so my grandmother, being just an amazing, amazing, compassionate person, she couldn't refuse not to give them shelter and help them in that tragic time.
See, Iryna, this leads me to the ultimate question, which probably has no answer. Iryna, your grandmother was a widow. She was raising 3 girls alone under German occupation with 4 mouths to feed. Food is scarce, and yet she makes the decision to shelter an additional 3 people. So now Kateryna is faced with the task of feeding and caring for 7 people under the eyes of the German Gestapo. Caring for 4 people was a daunting task. Feeding and caring for 7 seems unimaginable. And yet, Kateryna was clearly determined to do this. So my next question maybe doesn't have an answer. I call it the mystery of human goodness. But I'd like to hear your answer. Why did your grandmother do this? What motivated your grandmother? Did she say anything? Did anyone ever ask her, why are you doing this? Did she ever speak about it?
We asked these questions many times ourselves, and I asked my mother, and there's no answer. Only she could, have an answer, but I don't know, out of her compassion, good heart, sorrows, I don't know, all this, that human beings are possessed of. That's I would think.
Yeah.
And going back, because I didn't answer your question about why Yad Vashem recognized only Iryna and not the 2 girls. Because Yad Vashem policy, they recognize children 15 and beyond. And so my mother and her sister were much younger. So probably that was the decision. Even though Iryna was only 13, I remember the Mr. Leonid Klar and his wife Lida came to Yad Vashem with this testimony. They were begging them, you have to recognize at least one of this girl, what they did. So they just did that.
Yes. And by the way, Iryna Kropan, our speaker, is the daughter of the middle girl, Christina, the middle child. People talk about the mystery of evil, the mystery of human evil, but we are here to focus on the mystery of human goodness, selflessness. This is also a mystery, a wonderful mystery. I understand that after she was betrayed, Iryna, the girls visited before she was shot, before she was put to death. After she was betrayed and arrested, the girls visited their mother. How were they able, a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, to visit their mother in jail miles away? How did that happen?
They missed her mother dearly. And they did everything possible just to go to have a glimpse of her, even though It was 30 kilometers away from Pidhaitsi. It was the town of Berezhany where she was sent to prison. And they walk 30 kilometers in the winter, in the fall, and the rain. So, but they just want to see their mother. Even sometimes they don't have anything to bring her because they didn't have any food to share. But they would just walk just to see her because they miss her. They were lonely. They were scared. They were terrified. They were hungry. So when they walk, sometimes they see the horses with carriages and wagon. So they would jump and ride for 1 kilometer or 2 and then walk again and walk again. So that was the journey. They have to, I don't know, do it.
Just amazing, amazing, amazing. After she was put to death by the Nazis, and they learned the horrible news that their mother had been put to death by the Nazi regime. How did the girls survive the war all alone in that farmhouse?
You know, even though the Iryna attended the court, the verdict, she was there, and the trial. But when she comes home, she tells the girls what happened and the sentence. They denied, they refused to believe that. They still waiting for their mother to come home. They always believed that they will wait for her and pray and she would come back. So they live in the house and the family house for almost a year alone, waiting for the mother to come back. But she never did.
Yes. I want to switch subjects. You are the head, you had a remarkable movement to restore the ancient synagogue of Pidhaitsi. I'm going to put it up on the screen again. This synagogue was built in the 1600s. These are the ruins of the old synagogue of Pidhaitsi. And this is the focus of your restoration project. Would you please talk a little bit about this? And can we contribute? Are we able to contribute to this project, Iryna?
Absolutely. I would love you people to contribute and we can save this historical treasure because it is a treasure. Once in this small town, there was a thriving Jewish community, businesses, schools, buildings. And now there is only, one building and a huge cemetery. By the way, it's the biggest cemetery in Galicia. So I would love you people to contribute and donate, and we can save together this historical building. And as you know, many people looking for their ancestors, the cemetery, they come to visit Pidhaitsi and they see this synagogue in ruin. And I think we can do something about it.
Well, God bless you. God bless you, Iryna. And by the information as to how one can contribute to this wonderful project is right on our website, the Or Shalom website. Just go to the first page of the website and you'll find the information. By the way, I was blown away by this. There's a plaque dedicated to Kateryna, your grandmother, in the heart of Pidhaitsi. And there's the priest, and there you are. There's your mother. What is this all about? Were you instrumental in getting this plaque affixed to that wall in Pidhaitsi?
Yes, that was my idea because this tragedy runs through my heart, through my core, I would say. And I wanted to commemorate my grandmother, her heroic act, and for people to be inspired. So I did that. And
God bless you.
So I did that, and we actually named the street, and she's this flag on the building, and above the flag there is the name of the street, of Kateryna Sikorska
Kateryna
Street.
Sikorska Street. Unbelievable. And this
Leads to synagogue, actually.
this is the
Yeah.
priest, the town priest,
Priest, and this is my,
and your mother, and yeah.
there's no my mother. My mother was passed away
Oh, I
already.
see, I'm sorry.
Maria,
But your
Maria,
aunt?
yeah,
Maria.
my aunt next to me, yeah.
And this picture made me put a big smile on my face. Here are Hasidim visiting Pidhaitsi, visiting the graves of loved ones, and then stopping to pay respects to the plaque that you put up. That you do you see?
Yeah.
This is an amazing picture.
Yeah, one of my friend sent me that picture. He was actually helping, yeah, to organize everything with the flag. And then one day he was just in the town walking, and he saw this Hasidic Jews. Yeah, so they stopped and they took the picture, and he sent it to me. That was amazing. I was really glad.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to put up, before removing the screen share, this is another picture, another look at your amazing grandmother, Kateryna, and her amazing daughters. Iryna's mother is right here on the left. This is your mother, right?
Correct.
Yeah, this is the older girl in the middle, as if she's
Iryna. Yeah.
guarding the other two. And here's the baby, Maria. This is after the war. This picture was taken after the war.
Correct.
She was only 6 years old. Iryna was 13, and mom, Christina, was 10 years old. Folks, the time has come to present Iryna with a certificate of special recognition. It gives me great pleasure once again to introduce Senator Richard Blumenthal, who will present a certificate of special recognition to Iryna Korpan, which you, Iryna, will receive on behalf of your grandmother, and I'll mail it to you. Senator Blumenthal has served as the United States Senator from the state of Connecticut since 2011 and has just been re-elected to serve another term of office. Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Senator Blumenthal, I learned that you have visited Ukraine and have met with President Zelensky twice on 2 occasions this past year. We all applaud your strong support of the valiant Ukrainian people at this decisive moment in their history. Iryna, you and I were talking about Senator Blumenthal, and Iryna and the Canadian community is very much aware of your efforts and your amazing support of the Ukrainian people at this time. So she applauds you as well.
Correct.
At
Congratulations.
this time, it gives me pleasure to call upon Senator Richard Blumenthal.
Iryna, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm honored to be with you. I wish we were in person, and I hope one day to meet you in person. And I want to just begin by thanking Rabbi Winehouse and the congregation of Or Shalom for once again on this 16th occasion commemorating Kristallnacht by celebrating a remarkable, moving story. I don't know whether you have been told, Iryna, but in the audience here are a number of young people who have had a chance to hear your story. And I think their lives will be shaped by that story. But I want to, in particular, thank Rabbi Winehouse. He will celebrate his 40th year at Or Shalom next Saturday, I believe. And I'm a little bit early in congratulating him. Mazel tov. Thank you on behalf of all of us in the state of Connecticut for your leadership over these years. It has been really extraordinary. Just to tell you a little bit more about myself, Iryna, in introducing myself to you now. My own father came from Germany in 1935. He was 17 years old. He came to this country alone. He was not much older than the young people here, or than your mother was at the time your grandmother died. He spoke virtually no English. He had not much more than the shirt on his back, and he knew almost no one. And he succeeded in bringing over his mother and father and his siblings, and the rest of his family perished in the Holocaust. So like Rabbi Winehouse, I have a personal connection to your story. And as he has said, I have visited Ukraine twice this year with colleagues from the United States Senate to speak to President Zelensky, who, as you know, I'm sure you know, is Jewish, and also to visit the mass graves in the area around Kyiv. I went to the town of Bucha and Iryna, where hundreds of women and children were killed, their hands tied behind their back, in acts of genocide that are as horrible as what the Nazis did. So this story has resonance. It has meaning now beyond simply honoring a very, very good person who did very good things. It reminds us that evil is still alive in this world, that war crimes and genocide continue to this day. And as you well know, Iryna, the Ukrainian people have been subject to the persecution from Russia over centuries. The Russians have tried to destroy their language, their religion, their culture, relentlessly, decade after decade, century after century. So this story is real. It is happening in real time. But what really strikes me, and the reason why I felt so moved by this story, is what Rabbi Winehouse referred to as the mystery of good. And it is a mystery. 36-year-old woman, widowed, essentially a peasant woman with 3 daughters. What's in it for her? It's all downside, as the financial type would say. It's all risk, no reward for her in material terms, to provide a hiding place for these 3 people. And, you know, in our past, and I think I've been to all of the 16, very often our heroes are people who are government officials or diplomats, people of position in life, who could envision that they would be somehow celebrated in history, maybe, or who could understand that they're part of a historical fabric of resistance. But this is a peasant woman who farms for a living and who decides she will not only feed 3 additional people, but risk her own life and her daughters. It's just incomprehensible in material terms. It is a mystery. And to this day, as Iryna has told us, we simply don't know why she did it. So the mystery of goodness prevails in this day too, in what we see and what I've heard in Ukraine right now. what people have done there to preserve their freedom and independence, the courage and ferocity of their fight for their country, ordinary people taking risks to save lives. And I hope that the meaning of today will be understood by the many who are watching, by people who are here, people who are listening to you, Iryna, and who know of Kateryna's extraordinary courage and heroism, because the threat to our freedom and independence is as real today as it was then. We see the rise of anti-Semitism, the resurgence of ethnic nationalism. Again, very real in real time today. So I'm hoping that we will all be inspired by this example of bravery and strength, grace and dignity from a woman who had no model in her own family, who had no education, who had no material motive to stand up and speak out. And as the rabbi said, I saw him quoted, and I'm going to paraphrase, the reasons that for the rise of Nazism was that people remained silent. They remained silent. They failed to stand up when it could have been stopped. And that, above all, should be a lesson for us today, that if a 36-year-old peasant woman could put her life on the line and her daughters at risk simply to save 3 people, we ought to have the courage today to stand up and speak out when we see things that are wrong, at much less risk, before evil triumphs, even in our own country, because it can happen anywhere. I have a certificate of recognition, Iryna, for your grandmother, which I will present to Rabbi Wainhouse,
And I'll mail it to you.
and he will mail it to you in honor of your grandmother's courageous harboring members of the Jewish faith in Nazi-occupied Ukraine, ultimately sacrificing her own life to defy evil. I'm very honored to be with you today, and again to be with Congregation or Shalom. I thank you. And
Thank you so much. Let's just pose for a moment. Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much
thank you, Rabbi.
for your support of this program, 16 years in a row. Thank you. And we'll see you at the 17th annual Kristallnacht event next year. Don't know who the hero is. Thank you again. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to turn the program over to Rabbi Joshua Pernick, who is the new rabbi in residence at Federation. Mazel Tov, Joshua. Rabbi Joshua, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Wainhouse and Senator Blumenthal and our esteemed panelists. It's such an honor to be here with you all this morning for this really incredible event, this annual event, and the work that Rabbi Wainhouse does each year, 16 years in a row, of keeping Holocaust memory alive is so critical for our community and for our world. As Senator Blumenthal just spoke about. So really, I could say as a 3G, as a third generation, my grandparents were survivors as well. Really something that's so important. And we so appreciate all of the work that Congregation Or Shalom and Rabbi Wainhouse and all of you do to keep Holocaust memory alive. At this point, I'm honored to be moderating the question and answer session. So I know a number of questions and answers have come in over the course of Iryna's presentation, as well as Marlene's presentation from Yad Vashem. And so as we go through the questions and answers, I also encourage people who have not yet had a chance, but have questions that they want to ask to one of our panelists, one of our speakers, to please write those into the Q&A, and I'll try with the time allotted to ask some of these questions. So I'll start with our first question, which Iryna touched on a little bit, about how Kateryna was arrested and executed. And we talked about your mother, Iryna, and your aunt escaping. Wonder if ultimately there were any consequences for either your mother or for your mother's sisters as a result of being aware of being part of this, risking their lives to save these 3 individuals.
But my mother was telling me that it was really hard for family to keep contact, because they were afraid that they would be treated as Jews supporters. And so they would visit their family relatives, maybe in the evening at night, that nobody see. And they were not allowed to come to the house, because they were basically afraid. Because even as a supporter of the Jews, you could be persecuted.
Thank you, Iryna. Another question that you touched on a little bit, we were talking about how Yad Vashem honored your mother and your aunt, and then at the end spoke a little bit about the plaque that you were involved in having, commemorating your grandmother in her hometown. Wonder if the Ukrainian government or any other governments or organizations, institutions have told your story and formally honored your family for their courageousness.
Not really, because I live in Canada, and I sponsor my mother here, and she lives with me for over 25 years. So as a Ukrainian government, at the beginning, this story become really well known only after Ukraine declared independence. Before that, in the Soviet Union, we were not allowed. We were under Nazi regime as well. They were not allowed to share the story like that. And I didn't hear the story from my mother until later on, when we already have free Ukraine. Then they were really free to talk about the time. So we never actually asked any of the government officials to do anything. And I know my cousins, aunts, who's awarded with the honor of Yad Vashem, Iryna, her son is working for Babin Yar, and he is a scientist there. So he does publish many, publications and books and so on. So the story, no.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And hopefully, as your story is shared today, your family story, and the heroism as Senator Blumenthal spoke about, and how resident it is in today's world. Hopefully these are your story, your family stories, and those like it are continued to share, and your family continues to be honored and gain more honor from more organizations, more governments as well. A few questions in our Q&A relate to how your grandmother's work was discovered. I know she was who portrayed her. We know a neighbor found out about it, but if you know, or anyone knows, how the neighbor found out about it, and how that all took place.
We were talking about this with my mom and aunts. We would like to know that, but what we were come up with is that because Mr. Clark produced this false ID Aryan papers, probably one of the Jew were apprehended and under torture probably gave out the name of Mr. Clark. That's why they came to the grandmother's house to look just for photographer Clark. So we think so. Because I don't know if that the neighbors, or because neighbors very had good relation with grandma, and they lives like in harmony and helping and assist each other. So we would like assume that probably this is what happened.
Okay, thank you. One question that I'll ask for Marlene, we talked about Kateryna as well as, I want to make sure I have this right. This was Iryna who was honored as well by Yad Vashem, right? And we asked about Kateryna's brother. There's a question there, or if any other family members in any way have been recognized by Yad Vashem, or if the story in any other way, in addition to what was spoken about, has been part of Yad Vashem's story of the righteous of the nations.
Is the question to me? Good morning, or?
Yes, if you could share a little bit about how the family story.
Thank you. Good morning, and Mazel Tov to Senator Blumenthal. I didn't get to say that before. Anyway, I looked on the Yad Vashem website just to get an idea of the rescuers from Ukraine. And that's how I had the exact date of the recognition as well as the certificate. I did not come across any other family members, but I do not have access to the documentation of the whole process. So I'm happy to look into it in further detail, but I don't know right now more information that I'm able to share with you right now. Maybe Iryna, you know more details. I'm sure you do.
Not really. This is I know what you know, basically. Yeah.
So the process is actually very formal, and it's a legal process. When I speak to students about the entire topic of recognizing heroes, I connect it to Holocaust denial, because it's incredible to honor these heroes of such acts of compassion and kindness, but it's also documentation that the Holocaust happened. And every component of recognizing heroes of any kind, you know, this stuff has to be authenticated. So the documentation would be at Yad Vashem, even though the website itself does have a list of from each country who was recognized and by what date. Just general knowledge if anybody wants to know of other heroes as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that. A couple of questions came in just asking a little bit more information, Iryna, about your family story, about what kind of work, you know, your family, your, I guess, grandfather who passed away before the war, as well as your grandmother. I know they sort of lived out in the shtetl. If they were farmers, what kind of, you know, occupation and work they did. I'll also tie that into a second question that asked about the parents of the two boys who your grandmother hid, and if we have any information about them and what happened to them.
So as we know about those boys, they were apprehended and arrested by the Gestapo and took it away together with Mr. Clark, and they're just perished in Holocaust. Nobody knows anything about them. But the thing is that when the Clark family gave the testimony to Yad Vashem about my grandmother and mentioned the name of the names, there was a Professor Tortel in Jerusalem got in touch with Yad Vashem because apparently those two boys were his cousins. Yeah, and I had in pleasure meeting him, and he's actually in my film. Yeah, so that's how he find out about his cousins and what happened and the fate of those two cousins. But anything else, we don't know. We just know that the first, how they call akция, when they rounded up Jews and took to the, to the outskirt of town to kill them. That was over 500 people. The first action that was took place in Pidhaitsi, and those are the poorest Jews in Pidhaitsi that were killed in mass grave. And Mr. Clark even put the monument on that mass grave, and it's still there now.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'll just go back a little to the first part of that question about what you know about your family's, your grandparents' background, and what kind of work and education, if they were farmers, if you know what kind of work they did there, or what was their educational.
My grandfather was a blacksmith. Yeah, but he got sick, and lack of medication. He got sick, and eventually he died. And my grandmother was uneducated, as Mr. Rabbi says, a peasant woman. They have a farm, they have animals they look after. They just, what other Ukrainians at that time did. Yeah.
Thank you. Two questions that we have in the Q&A that are similar. You touched on a little bit, but maybe we can flesh out in a bit more detail about your mother and her sisters in that period after your grandmother was killed. If we know how they were able to survive, how they were able to get food, even just the basic necessities of human survival. How did they make it until the war was over and even beyond?
Oh, well, they grew up helping my grandmother, because there was nobody else in the household. So they learned how to do chores and help mother on everyday basis. And that's what they learned. And they survived for 1 year because they're hoping that mother will come back. And sometimes, especially during the holidays like Christmas or Easter time, the neighbors would bring some food and special food for Christmas. And she told me about one story that about the Easter time, when the neighbor came to the house and brought this Pascha, we call the Easter bread, and Easter eggs, and they light up the candle, sit around the table, and burst in cries, in tears, because they couldn't even eat this food without mother. So, and that was so emotional to me when my mother was sharing that story. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Iryna. Thank you so much, Marlene, as well, and Senator Blumenthal, Rabbi Wainhouse, everyone who's here. As I mentioned, these stories are so important that they are told, that we remember these stories, because history echoes, and often the stories that take place in one generation, that heroism, unfortunately, the need for heroes in each generation arises. Just as evil occurs in generation after generation, so do heroes like your grandmother, like your mother and your aunts. And hopefully the stories that we heard today are reminders for everyone here of all ages of the importance of standing up, for not being silent when something is clearly wrong, even when everyone else is being silent. So I want to once again thank you both for being here. Iryna, thank you so much for sharing your family story. I'm so honored to be here among you today.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Kermit. Thank you. I think the time has come to wrap it up. And President Spalding, will you help us wrap it up? I think you have a couple of announcements to make.
Good morning again. And thank you all that are here, both in person and online, for another heartfelt, heart-wrenching at the same time presentation of information of what has gone on with Kateryna and her family. And indeed, the mystery of evil and goodness continues, doesn't it? A number of thank yous are in order for making all this happen today. Senator Blumenthal, thank you so much again for being with us. It's great having you as an annual gig, as they say. So thank you for being here one more time. Thank you to the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven for helping out. And I'm looking across the room at my technical partner, Derek, who has made a lot of this all work smoothly this morning. Thank you, Derek, so much. Thank you to the congregation of Or Shalom Men's Club for the ongoing support for this annual event and making it happen. Mitch, you guys do wonderful work. And thank you to the Shulman family for their generous support also for this program. And dear friends, please consider donating. And there are 4 causes that are soliciting donations. They are the Pidhaitsi Synagogue Restoration Project, of course, the American Society for Yad Vashem, the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven, and lastly, Congregation Or Shalom. You may donate to any one of those causes just by visiting the Or Shalom website. And once again, thank you for attending. Finally, to my buddy standing next to me, thank you so much for all the work that you put in making this happen every year.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We truly
I
appreciate it.
appreciate it.
And so, lastly, happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Yes.
And we should end this program today by singing a song.
And the song will be God Bless America. Bob, do you feel up to it?
Sure, I'll do that.
Good. I
Why
just want
not?
to just a shout out to John Usel, Senator Blumenthal. John has been terrific. He's been very helpful. I think you know who I'm talking about, John Usel. Yeah. At any rate, go ahead. Let her rip.
Let her rip, as they say. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Shalom. Shalom. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.